Hello, everyone. This is Zubin Mowlavi, welcoming you to another episode of Coffee and Commerce. Really excited to have our esteemed guest with you, Maha Abouelenein, who is the Chief Value Officer for Gary Vaynerchuk. We thought we would kind of change it up this time. Our intent with Coffee and Commerce, as you know, is to push the commerce conversation forward. And the commerce conversation isn't always about specifically commerce. It's not about tactical e-commerce advice. While it can be, we really want to make sure that those who are starting a company and those who are building what they have understand what it takes holistically to do that. And if you're going to add value to your customers and ultimately what you're doing, you've got to have value built into your organization. So without further ado, welcome, Maha. Tell us a little about yourself.
Thank you. First of all, you did a pretty good job on my last name. So it's Abouelenein. I'm pretty impressed. Hey, everybody. I'm so excited to be here on Coffee and Commerce. I just don't have any coffee. But what I will try to do during the session with Zubin is try to really add some value to you guys. So just by way of background, I am American Egyptian, born and raised in Minnesota, spent a good portion of my life living overseas in global markets in Egypt and in Dubai. Really kind of worked in a lot of tech for companies. I used to be the head of communications at Google, brought a lot of global brands to the Middle East, including Netflix and Kareem, which is the Uber of the Middle East, and Deezer, which is the Spotify sort of competitor on that side of the pond, really big in Europe. If you're from Europe, you know it's what Deezer is. And worked a lot in communications and helping businesses kind of tell their stories through reputation management and storytelling. And I've been officially working with VaynerMedia officially since January of this year as Gary's Chief Value Officer, which I'll explain in a bit, and as Executive Vice President of Business Development for the company. But been working with Gary, known him since 2017, and just really excited to be here and hopefully give you guys a lot of value in this session today, talking about things a little bit differently in terms of like how you can add value to your business, your reputation, personal branding, storytelling, all the kind of stuff that I'm so passionate about talking about. So thanks for having me here today.
That's awesome. Thanks, Maha. Maha, tell us a little bit about how you met Gary and then bring us up to kind of January this year when you started, because I think there's a lot of value that you built into what happened and then value that people can gain from that.
Yeah, it's actually quite an interesting story. I had never heard of Gary, didn't know who he was. I had a friend who had recommended me to read his book, Crush It. And Crush It is a book. It's one of Gary's first books. It's a really thin one. It was easy to read. Talks about like building a business around things you're passionate about or building a platform and doing what you really care about. And I really am passionate about communications. And I thought, well, I have a long-standing career in communications. Why don't I build a platform to tell people what I've learned working with Google and working with Netflix and working with all these amazing companies and helping people communicate better. So I spent a lot of time thinking, what's my passion? My passion is to help people communicate better. And I learned a lot from that book. So I started following Gary. And Gary had interviewed a woman named Cy Wakeman who was on his show promoting a book. I followed Gary's advice. I DM'd someone I really admired, which is Cy. I basically told her, I'd love to meet you and have you come speak in the Middle East. Not having a speaking opportunity available. I just knew that might be something I want to do someday because I just loved your story.
That's awesome.
She connected me to Gary's team. I met her. She connected me to Gary's team, met with Gary. And my initial premise was, Gary, we should build VaynerMedia in the Middle East. I had built Weber Shandwick, which is a global PR firm, like 19 of their offices in the Middle East. And so I said, we can do the same thing for VaynerMedia in terms of their digital marketing and advertising and what Gary does every day. So long story short, he's like, we need to get to know each other, build a relationship. And I just started adding value. This is what the Middle East is about. This is what Dubai is about. This is the market. This is how you should be thinking about your brand in terms of global. This is what Gary V outside the US would look like. Here's how we would talk to customers in different markets. The internet gives everyone an even playing field. So your brand can work in any market. Gary could speak in any market. He could do advertising in any market. So I really spent a year, all of 2018, just talking to him about the ways I think the business could grow and how his brand could grow globally and where I think that his business and thinking was unique. And I've been living and working in the US at General Mills, living and working overseas. And I saw sort of like the value gap that, you know, he could play in. So then we started working together just as a consultant. I have my own business. I was my own entrepreneur. And so he hired me to help him do some work for him. And I just kept on, like, it's funny because Gary's not the kind of guy who gives you like scope of work and you deliver. You just want to go all in, right? You need to just add more value. I'm like, this is a man who has access to everyone and everything. What could I do that's unique that'll add value to his business? What could I do that's unique that'll add value to him?
Sure.
And that's the premise of how I built my relationship with him, is trying to find ways to add value in anything that was required, that I had unique skills or relationships that could benefit him and or the company. And then he basically said, why don't you come join us in January? So I joined the company full time, and just enormous culture, terrific people, just learning a lot about this side of the business. Communications and PR and reputation management is one muscle, and dealing with, digital marketing and advertising and creative and how he approaches things is a different muscle. And it's just been extraordinarily rewarding and a lot of fun, to be honest with you.
That's awesome. Ma, you've got a really interesting POV around value, and not only how you define value in different scenarios, but also how you measure it. Talk to us a little bit about that. I think the audience can gain quite a bit in terms of your understanding of value and how you deliver it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There aren't a lot of chief value officers out there. And the reason why I really wanted any focus on value was that value is not what's important to me. It's what's important to the other party, what's important to you, right? So how do I make sure I'm adding value that's of something that's worthy for them and means a lot to them? So think about relationships. When you're doing business and you have a startup or you have a company and you really want to figure out what's going to be your relationship with the other side, think about what could you do to bring the most value to them. Is it to help them with the introduction? Is it to help solve a problem? Is it to help them with a sales issue? Is it to help them get a story in the media? Is it to help them give somebody a job? Like, what's the value creation chain that you can create and lean into that? A lot of times people ask me about networks and your value is the network, the relationships you bring. And they worry, what if I introduce A to B and then they cut me out and I'm not part of the value equation? Like, I just introduced this CEO to this CEO and I wasn't part of it. You created value. If you did something that's worthy for both A and B, you've created value for that relationship. Both of those people are going to remember and recognize that because you've created value for somebody else. Don't worry about cashing it in today or tomorrow or the next day. Sure. Continue to be consistent in creating value for the other person.
But I think you bring up a really good point in there as well. Many good points, but one that stuck out for me is that you mentioned value being kind of in the eye of the beholder. And so you're providing value to somebody, but they have to benefit from ultimately the value that you're providing. I think it's also true, and you're kind of alluding to this, that it's who you're bringing value to. So you could just introduce anyone to anyone, but if they don't value the fact that you did that for them, then it becomes a really short-lived experience and a short-lived relationship. And again, that kind of value chain diminishes. So how do you, for the entrepreneurs out there that are listening, how do you know where to put that value? Because a lot of people know a lot of people, right? And they can spend their time helping XYZ person, but how do you understand who it is that you should actually lean into? Who do you help?
Okay. The first person you help is yourself, right? You invest in yourself first. You can't create value for other people if you have nothing of value yourself. So I always talk about elevate, like create for yourself and elevate yourself before you think about helping other people. It's just like the mask in the airplane, put it on yourself before you help someone else. So what do? I invest in learning. I invest in training. I invest in relationships. I invest in networks. I invest in helping other people. So like, I want to make sure that I bring something to the table that's of value. So that's where you start. The value chain starts with you, of what do you have to offer, or what do you have that's of value that other people might be able to use. The second thing is thinking about, and I do a lot of this, it's a lot about listening, like listening to where the opportunities are, reading where the opportunities are, like where can I go in and add value? Like, for example, One of the things that I'm super passionate about, and everyone in the company is going to hear me talking a lot about this, is esports and gaming. And, where could we add value in that space? Where is there an opportunity that people don't understand that we uniquely can help in that space? So listening to what's happening in the market, listening to how businesses are handling supply chain, listening to the opportunities in the market, that curbside pickup and how things are happening. So where could I go in and add value to help a company develop a system to get orders that you can book through an app and go pick up curbside? That's the thing about listening that allows you to create value for that opportunity.
I think there are a lot of parallels with this. As I mentioned at the onset, I mean, we're talking about commerce, but in order to have a successful commerce organization, whether you're just starting out, you're trying to hit 8 figures, 9 figures in sales, ultimately it's about that organization and the culture you're building and the value that you instill within the organization. Kind of shifting gears a little bit, I think what you mentioned about listening is really important, and listening to your consumer, listening to the market, just kind of having your eyes and ears out there. Yeah, totally. Expand on that for us a little bit.
Just, being externally focused is how you stay, right? Being in your own bubble about focusing on, like, I block time off my calendar to sit and read and be externally focused to find out what's happening in the market, not just listening to podcasts, watching shows like this on YouTube, really making sure you're understanding how consumer behavior is shifting and changing. And it's not just shifting and changing because of COVID or because of the pandemic. It's just how fast things are adapting in the market every day, and how our lives have been changing because of mobile communications, and how, the shift of, our attention span, like we can't wait for things. Like, if you were to say to me like 5 years ago, like a 10-second video, that sounds like really short. Like, that's long. Like, for me to wait 10 seconds into a video to see what it's about, like, our thought process on what we think time is even, is measured has changed. Like, we would never think of, let's create a 10-second video. That's 10 seconds is a long time if you think about it now.
So yeah, in terms of listening, right? So you listen, you read, you consume, and then you have to react. And then there is, when you react as an organization or as an individual, you're putting yourself out there. And when you put yourself out there, there are going to be people who agree with you. There are going to be people who don't agree with you. The more provocative you are, the more polarizing you're going to be potentially. How do you manage all of that from a reputation standpoint?
So I like to treat, and this is something I talk about continuously too, like, I like to think about reputation in terms of currency. What's yours worth? What's the value? What are you doing to protect it? What are you doing to grow it? Like, if you think of your reputation, you can have the best sales team, the best marketing engine, the best supply chain. You can have the best product with the best price. But if you don't have a good reputation, no one's going to come to you for initial business or repeat business or trust you to be, purchasing your product, or that you'll deliver what you say you're going to deliver. So when you think about listening, think about yourself. Like, what are the brands that you trust? What are the reasons why you trust that brand? It's because they have a good reputation. It's because they're transparent. It's because they're active and member of the community. It's because they're adding value to everyone that they work with. Are they good to their suppliers? Are they good to their employees?
Totally.
I'm so glad that you brought up the employees thing, because I think even in terms of communications, it's one of the most overlooked ones in a company. And a lot of founders who have organizations, like, invest in your internal communications. Like, your employees are your, like, brand ambassadors. They're the front line of your company. So you should really think about making sure they know things first. They hear something before you go out with it publicly. I remember just the story of, like, talking to this company about training everybody in the company on the key messages about what the company's values were. And they're like, we don't need to do that. They don't talk to the press. I'm like, yeah, but they have friends and families, and they go out to dinner, and they're asked about, where do you work and what do you do? And they get asked questions about things that any company's doing. So wouldn't it behoove you to, like, make sure that they know the right answers to give? And so that's the investment that people should be thinking about when it comes to reputation and making sure the internal piece is dealt with as well.
So Maha, let's tap into a different part of your experience, international expansion.
Yep.
Many of the people that we work with, I mean, going back a few years, we worked with a number of organizations in the UK, and we had a series of workshops there, and we were supporting them in terms of expansion of the US. One thing that was really interesting even back then was in the B2B space, they were more so looking at what is the viable expansion route to the US. You start talking to the e-com ones, even 4 or 5 years ago, they were like, shit, we're getting 5% of our sales in the US. And how do we actually grow that? How do we do more with that? So we were guiding them on that approach. And what's happening nowadays with e-commerce, you spin up a store, and if you make it available, your product, and shipping prices are reasonable to an extent anywhere in the world, people will buy it anywhere in the world. So what experience can you share with our viewers in terms of international expansion from the perspective of communication, content, and that standpoint? And then I can talk a little bit about my experience as it relates to kind of the more tactical side of it.
Yeah, I mean, the first things first is like know your audience. Just like any basic premise of advertising, same things goes when it goes to going international and global. Like know your audience, understand, are there cultural issues that we need to be aware of? Are there products that we won't be able to sell in these certain markets? Are there specific guidelines or things that we have to have that meet local regulations? So understanding the local market sensitivities is a really, really big one. Second thing is think about language barrier. Like what are some of the things that even though there might be selling them from different markets and cross-culturally, you think it's going to translate, make sure you're looking under the hood for a reference of something that might mean something is in one language is something else, even on a post or on a content or something that you're trying to do globally. I think the most successful brands that have been able to translate across markets, like not just when you think about franchises, about how they have to be consistent in every market, is they really lean into telling a local story with local heroes and local people that can be part of that story. So if you're going to have a product that you're going to be selling in different markets and you're going to reach those markets, should you engage with local influencers to help kind of tell the story and localize your business and brand? Should you be talking to the local press in those markets so they know more about your business and your brand? You know more about how to handle things like shipping and logistics and the back end of how to make sure a brand goes global. But I spent a lot of the last, 6-7 years living in Dubai. Huda Beauty is based in Dubai. They're a brand that's based in the Middle East and has like a large customer base in the US. They're a really good example of someone who has a brand that can be out of anywhere in any city or in any country in the world. Maybe a lot of people don't know that they're based in Dubai, but they are. And it just goes to speak to how the marketplace has an even playing field for anyone who wants to put a business on the internet and sell their products on the internet. Gives them a huge, huge, huge opportunity to reach customers around the world.
That's great. I appreciate that. I see some questions coming in terms of kind of why even go international. So I think it's really important. There we go. Thank you, Dustin. So my first question would be, why expand internationally first at all? So here's my take on this. You creating a product, depending on the product that you're creating. Sometimes people create a product specific to a region. They create a product that's specific for a locale or for an industry. It's a commoditized product, or you're creating something completely new that the world has never seen. Those two things are completely different, right? If you're creating a commoditized product, you may have done some market research. You know that you want to launch in the US, presumably you're in the US or wherever you are, and you want to launch in your local market. That makes a lot of sense, but a lot of success stories with organizations are international expansion stories because they think there's a certain market within a certain region, and they're like, oh, we've got several 100 million people in the US that would be interested in my product. Why should I even look at Canada? Why should I even look at France or Germany or Australia? And many of the companies that we've worked with have actually started a business in the US and they've done quite well. And then once they start expanding internationally, they actually realize that, oh shit, my product is actually selling much better in Australia. There are fewer people there, but they love my product for one reason or another. And not only that, take into consideration advertising costs and return on ad spend and CAC and whatnot. And you go to some of these countries and you actually get better economics when you expand there. So plus, there are other tools now that are available, like Shopify fulfillment and other things internationally that kind of lower that barrier of entry of international expansion. But my point would be, test the waters, right? Get what you're doing right in the region you're in. Test the waters, and then test in your native language to begin with. Recently, somebody was asking me about European expansion, and I believe it was somebody in the UK. They were saying they're going to start selling in France and Germany and Spain, and should they localize the language? Well, what we've seen and what we've tested quite often is English is pretty well spoken around the world, and if somebody loves your product, they will buy it. More people will buy it if it's localized in French, but ultimately they'll buy it. So what you do is you just test it. You build your site, you build a version that allows you to transact in euros, you make it available in those countries, you run a little bit of advertising, run some tests, see if the market is interested in your product, and then if it makes sense, take that next step and invest in the market. And to Maha's point, invest in local influencers, local content creators, localized even merchandising, because you realize like this shirt sells well in this country and a completely different color sells well in a different country. And so again, I know I'm expanding on the question, but I'm pretty passionate about international expansion. I just think that there's a lot of missed opportunities if you don't do it.
Yeah, and plus too, let's say you have inventory that's not moving in one market and might, like you said, do really well in another market. Like you have nothing to lose to put it out there and see if it can reach those consumers that might be interested in. The other thing too about why you should go international, like again on the listening thing, you're going to observe some trends. You're going to see some opportunities that are going to present themselves to you that might be something that you might want to pursue. And so you might say, okay, there's a huge demand for this in this market. I happen to offer that product or service, and then take that forward and reach out to that international market and help generate new revenue.
No, that's awesome. I know a question came up earlier in terms of, and this is a question that continually has been coming up recently around Facebook Shop versus Shopify and what to do. Thank you, Dustin. So Brandon RV1 asks, can you guys talk about the uses for Facebook Shop versus starting Shopify? It's a bit strange right now. So Brandon, it's going to get even more strange as more platforms make selling native on their platform. So our position, or my position on this is that, look, you've got to control your own .com to begin with. So this has to do with whether you're testing or you're growing an organization. So let's assume that you have a product idea in mind, you haven't actually built a company yet, and you want to test the waters. Well, why not test the waters where consumers are? So in that case, you set up your Facebook shop, you got your Shopify fulfillment on the back end. It won't cost you much, but the reason you do that is so that all your Facebook product orders and Instagram orders go directly into Shopify for fulfillment. And your customer information is in there and your products are in there and whatnot. So you're basically just leveraging Facebook as a storefront. And then as that works and as that grows, then you invest more in your own storefront on your .com, you drive traffic there, so on and so forth. But really think about this, if we kind of equate it to, simplistically speaking, retail. And the way I like to look at this is like every one of these channels right now is like a street or a city or a cross street, right? So Facebook is, say, Times Square. And then you've got your own site, which is in whatever city you live in, available worldwide, anybody can access it. And then you've got Instagram somewhere else. The point is, traffic is occurring everywhere. And so you want to capture that traffic where it is. So these are simply storefronts. If it's implemented correctly, you're not using Facebook for fulfillment and everything else. All of those orders go into your Shopify, BigCommerce, WooCommerce, whatever it is, store, and you leverage these things as storefronts. And so decide for yourself, which storefront do you want to invest in first? Where are your consumers?
Zubin, is it easy to switch for storefronts?
So I think it has become easier. That's a really good question, Maha. So before, you would basically be like, look, I'm going to have my Shopify store, and then I've got this other thing and this other thing. With what Facebook has done, and pretty much everybody else is going to start following suit, is that Facebook store is just a storefront. The Instagram one is a storefront. And then on the back, you've got your Shopify, or you've got your WooCommerce or your Magento or whatever it is. So it's almost a headless experience where it's happening on the front end, and whatever happens, your business operations are run by Shopify, or again, whatever you choose. Now, if you want to switch from like a WooCommerce to a Shopify to a Magento, that becomes more complicated. But leveraging these storefronts is a great way to just kind of have them up front, and then you run your business essentially on the back end.
Okay, I have another question. Sorry, I know I'm not supposed to be asking a question.
Go for it.
Interesting. So, commerce has to do a lot like selling products online, but what about services?
So that's a really good question. In terms of selling services online?
Yeah, just because a lot of people are trying to like leverage this internet and this digital world that we're living in with COVID. So like, can I create a Shopify account to sell services, or does it only, or whatever platform, work for products?
That's an excellent question, and one that I have actually some experience with on the consumer side of it. So I've got shout out to Michael Turner, my vocal teacher in Jersey. He's got a really cool experience, and it was one of the first that I saw. It was built on youcanbook.me. So basically, you go to his site and you want to book him for a vocal lesson. You put in your credit card information, you choose a date, it books it on your calendar, it books it on his calendar, and you're good to go. So I think a lot of that sort of thing makes sense. The problem with like digital goods are fine. You sell them on Shopify and whatnot. The issue that happens with, or not the issue, but the opportunity with services is about booking. So think about it like this. The scarce commodity when you're buying a product is how many of these have you produced, and can I buy this?
Inventory.
Scarce commodity, exactly, it's inventory. Scarce commodity in services is time. So and yes, you might have 10 people available to book at a certain time and whatnot if you're a larger organization, but the key in my mind is making it very simple so that your calendar, so if let's say you're a sole proprietor and you're training somebody or whatnot, and it's just you, well, you make your calendar available, you go into the scheduling software, you get it all set up, and then you choose something like that, youcanbook.me, so that it can take payment and it books it on both your calendars. If you have more people, you make their time available, so on and so forth. But in my mind, it's all about lowering that barrier of entry. And back to the theme of this conversation, value. Like if I'm going to book you, and then I'm going to have to, there was a recent actually service that I was looking at procuring. But you had to book them, you had to pay for it, and then they would contact you for scheduling.
Yeah.
But the problem is, if I'm going to pay you now, how am I going to know if I'm going to get it in? It's like selling a good. If I don't know if I'm going to get my product in 8 weeks or 1 week, why would I do it? But absolutely, I think that the service side of it, and just being able to, because there's two sides now, right? There is procurement and delivery. Procurement is like you paying for something online. You're paying for the good online. You're paying for the service online. But given what's available now and the prevalence of video calls, the delivery side of it is also becoming digital. So you don't need to be in the same city. So connect all the dots. But I love your question, Maha. What else you got for us?
That's it. I don't want to take up your time, but I was like, I might as well ask the expert since I'm here.
Yeah, no, I think that that there's a lot of opportunity. And what I'm realizing, especially in the engagement that we get online, is you've got organizations that we work with that are Fortune 500 companies that are realizing that they need to invest. Like they've had a .com, but it hasn't really been a primary focus. It's almost like a nice to have, or sprinkle. What is it, like frosting on the cake or whatever? Then you've got DTC. What was that?
Or sprinkles if you want to put some sprinkles.
Yeah, exactly. Or sprinkles. Then you've got DTC brands that were born digitally, and so all they know is digital, and then they're looking at retail and whatnot. And then you've got pretty much a lot of people that we engage with online, which are entrepreneurs, and they want to do something. They see the opportunity in e-commerce. Some want to build tools for it. Some want to sell products on it, whatnot. I think one really interesting area, back to Maha's point about adding value, and that if you really want to add value, you got to elevate before you create. So like elevate your own game, spend some time, understand. So let's say you want to have a service and you want to be able to sell it online, or you want to sell your products online, or you want to teach people how to sell products online. Spend some time with people who are doing it. and start giving some free advice. Brand yourself as an expert, get out there, read as much as you can, start doing it, learn it, and then start teaching other people. Because I think that this entire ecosystem of digital procurement, digital delivery is only going to grow, and there are opportunities for everyone within this ecosystem. So you don't have to necessarily be selling your own product or doing your own service. There are opportunities for those that want to train other people. Maha's point right now about service, I bet you there are millions of companies in the US right now that provide a service locally that could provide it internationally, nationally. If somebody were to train them, if somebody were to spend some time with them and teach them how to basically find those customers around the country and around the world and then deliver for them.
Yeah, I was just thinking like a service, like a cleaning company. Now, like when companies open back up, they're going to need to have service contracts to do cleaning. Could you, like, if you're a cleaning company, want to offer that service to people? How could you get somebody to come and book you on a recurring basis on your website? That's a service you can sell online and reach a lot of customers geographically in your area. There's a lot of opportunity now. And I think now is the time people to think about pivoting about what's happening in the marketplace. Where could we find opportunities? Supply chain, like, I'm in Minnesota, and, Shipt is a new company that's just doing really well. Pepsi's invested in their own, platform to sell things online in a different pantry shop. Like, everyone's innovating, the big companies and the small companies, the barber shops and like the big Fortune 500. So it's an interesting time to use the internet to create your own value, create your own opportunities. And, if anyone has any questions or wants to reach out, they can hit me up on Instagram or on Twitter. And I'm so excited that you asked me to be on the show.
Maha, you're the best. Thank you so much for joining us. Everybody who tuned in, thanks for tuning in. Those who listen later, thank you as well. Feel free to, as Maha mentioned, reach out to Maha, reach out to me, reach out to the rest of the team. We'll be doing this regularly. We love to have your questions as well. So please keep seeding them. Please send them over. And then if you want more in-depth conversation, reach out and we can have that. Again, our intention with Coffee and Commerce is to push the commerce conversation forward. Hope you got a lot of value out of today. And please feel free to follow us. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you.
See you later.